Thank you so much for staying tuned to 90.9 FM. My name is Lawrence Boschulte, and my guest, Mr. Walker. How are you, sir?
I'm fantastic, Lawrence. How are you?
Oh, I can't complain. It could be worse.
I agree with that.
So, how I do my interviews, the first portion is going to be a little bit about you. If you can tell us where you were born and raised, but you don't have to tell me the year that you were born.
Sure. Yeah, that sounds great. I was born on December 5th in New York City.
As a New Yorker, individual, I've been to New York a few times. I could visit there. I don't know if I could live there. It's a busy city.
Well, New York, on the whole, is a very intense place. The same things about it that make it exciting and make it a thrill to live there are the same parts about it that will chew you up and spit you out. And so it's always a kind of love-hate survival feeling in New York City, which is, I think, one of the reasons why this book, Corona City, resonated with so many people, because, when the pandemic was taking place, it's unnatural to see New York empty. Do you know?
Correct, yeah.
It's very surreal kind of time. And so that's what this book and audiobook are all about. It's a series of stories chronicling life in New York and New Jersey during the height of the COVID-19 pandemic.
Great, and we'll get to that shortly. So after growing up in New York for yourself, how was it? Did you like, another thing that, and I'm showing you my age now, the one thing I liked about, like I said, I was younger, so I didn't get to go to New York till I was older. Like even after college, I went to school in Cincinnati, Ohio. So New York came like after that, and everybody always talks about New York, Big Apple. That's the place to be. But I watched this one movie with the gangs. I forgot the name of the movie, but I used to remember when the guys were singing "Warriors come out to play." But I forgot the name. I forgot the name of the movie, but it was a gang movie, of course. And it was showing how. So of course, when you see stuff like that, you get frightened. Like, I don't know if I want to go to New York. This is crazy. This is nuts. But almost anywhere USA has bad areas. It's just that you have to know where to go and where not to go.
I, having been born in New York and lived there for most of my life, I would say that, yes, there are always going to be difficult parts of any huge metropolis, but I lived all over. I lived in Manhattan. I lived in Brooklyn. I lived in Washington Heights, and I lived in the Bronx for 2 years. And I don't know. There's something about New York that is a little different, and I don't know why that is. Maybe it's because of the diversity. It's a very unique place. And there's a lot of mythology around New York and misconceptions. And then you get there and you live there. Correct. And you realize, this is nothing like I anticipated.
No, correct. I growing up there now, as you stated, for most of your life and being all over the place, how was it for you in high school? And were you an individual who was on the sports team? Were you a bookworm? How was that?
Well, I never played sports because I knew from the time I was pretty young that I was going to be in show business. So I was a child actor. I did mostly theater. And so I was pretty focused, which is kind of unusual. I mean, I sort of just knew what trajectory my life was going to have. Obviously, I didn't know. You never know. There's always a lot that surprises you in the end. But I had an unusual kind of high school experience because I went to a high school for the arts. And so it felt a lot like college. It felt everybody had a major. Everybody there was really passionate, really weird. It's like all the weirdos got together. They were all dumped in one school. And it was a very unique opportunity that I will be grateful for all my life. It's not the usual story of the art. I mean, usually creative people have horrible high school experiences because they feel so alienated. They feel so different. I definitely felt that when I was younger, but again, I was really lucky in high school that I was that I had the parents that were supportive and listened to me when I said, this is what I want to do. Very unusual. I was very lucky.
What year did you start, as you stated, being a child actor?
When I was about 11.
So your parents had to take you to the casting calls and the various.
Well, I wasn't. I was working at the time. I was not. I actually grew up in the suburbs of Baltimore. So I lived in New York until I was 5, and then we ended up moving to Baltimore. And then I came back to New York for college when I was 18. But
I think Baltimore has one of the better schools for arts, right? I forgot the name of it.
Yeah. There is a great school for the arts in Baltimore. It's called Baltimore School for the Arts. I went to a place called Walnut Hill outside of Boston. Anyway, I was doing a lot of theater in Baltimore and then ended up going to this other school, this boarding school, when I was 15. And so it was weird. By the time I went to college in New York, it already felt like I had been in college.
I was about to say boarding school. I haven't been to one, but I've heard stories. And isn't it similar to the Army?
That's another kind of misconception people have. I think there are still schools like that. I'm not saying that it's not. And I don't know if you've seen or heard of the new movie, The Holdovers, which is that kind of school. It takes place in the 1970s at a boarding school over Christmas. And that kind of school is similar to the boarding school that is in Dead Poets Society. Is that kind of old school, very strict, usually all boys.
Yeah.
And it has that kind of it's just a very harsh kind of punitive atmosphere.
Correct.
Where,
so when I hear that, I'm scared. Like I was raised that.
I know. Because you would always hear that people were sent there as punishment. And so that's
Correct.
Usually what people think. Anytime I tell people I went away to school, that's what they think.
You misbehaved, child.
Yes, you must have done something really bad. It was actually the opposite of that. It was especially when I got there in '94. We were right in the middle of the neo, what would you call it? The neo hippie movement. Dave Matthews Band was really big. People were breaking all kinds of rules. It was a very free, open-minded atmosphere, and eventually the school got more and more reputable and prestigious. But it was always a really kind of open, really allowed to be themselves. So again, really unusual, really lucky.
Well, that's great to hear. So then after you went to the boarding school and you went to college, why did you choose a college in New York instead of maybe California, which is also known for its production of movies?
Well, I always knew my passion was the theater. And I knew that, and I did musical theater as well. And so I knew that NYU had a really strong program, whereas people, I think that kids who really wanted to focus on film, look, there's so many different colleges and great college programs, acting programs, regardless of what you end up doing. A lot of my friends who I went to NYU with ended up going to the West Coast, and now I see them more on TV and in films than I do in person. But then there's a lot of people who stayed or went to college in Michigan or North Carolina and then came to New York because they wanted to focus on the theater. And that was the path that I was gonna take. Of course, it changed, but at that point, that was the plan. And it was, it was an intense place to be at 18 years old.
Well, my niece went to Wild Lake High School in Columbia, Maryland, which is not close to Baltimore, but within striking distance. And and then she's going to graduate from Pace University in a few months. So
fantastic.
Yeah, I don't know. I haven't followed the ranking the college ranking between NYU and Pace, but both of them kind of provide the same thing because she's in the theater, like you stated. I think she's co-directed. Being in the university, she had to co-direct, I believe, 2 or 3 plays. Now that you stated that you went to college for that, how difficult are those type of situations to act in them?
I will say that there were, because it's so competitive, the highs are very high and the lows are very low. So when I would get a job, I would be on top of the world and in pretty good mental health. And when times were slow and it was just one audition after another and just a rejection after a rejection after rejection, it was harder to keep
positive,
regulated,
correct,
and to keep perspective and not allow it to affect my sense of self. And that's just something that everybody deals with. It's not for the faint of heart.
Well,
it's really, really, really hard. And I just got to a point where I said in my late 20s, I said, I don't want to do this, at least not right now. So I left the business and I went into broadcasting, a field no less competitive. It's not like I went into broadcasting because I thought it was going to be easier. I just needed to do something different and take a turn. So life is full of surprises.
Yeah.
You just don't know what kind of career you're going to end up having. And I think for a lot of people, what surprises them the most is the way you thought it was going to be, to end up tailor-making your own career. They think, oh, yeah, I'm going to go to college. I'm going to be an actor. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. I'm going to be on this show. I'm going to get that Broadway show. And then you get there, and it's like, oh, wow. I didn't realize how
difficult,
how messy this was going to be.
Yeah, I lost you a little bit when I asked you which one you did, but then I kind of understood what you said.
I lost you for a second there.
Yeah, so I lost you a little bit too when you were talking about when I asked you the question, were you in front or acting or directing? But I caught on and understood what you were saying, and I'll give you a little history of myself when I was more into film. And I went to Atlanta, and like you stated, when it's good, you're happy. But then when you can't, and while I wasn't the same as you were in front of the camera. For me, I was behind. And if you don't get the jobs, then it's like, okay, what's next? I got to do something. I can't just sit at home doing anything. You answered like 2 or 3 questions, giving me all that information. You answered like 3 questions. Especially no, that's great because for my niece, what you're going through or what you went through in the past, saying that can now when she listens to this program, when I send it to her, she can understand it'll fall. The right things add up in line after a while, and then if not, then you might have to change what you do. I was interviewing a gentleman here locally who does comic strips for children. Those. And he wanted to work with the big boys, cartoon. I think I forgot which one of the high ones. But as he grew older and he saw that might not be possible, he changed his goal. So that now you're not as stressed. Like, why can't I make this? But you set your goal now that you can achieve so that I know there's others out there listening that be like, oh, well, then he's not setting his goals high enough to reach. But sometimes when you set them too high, too unattainable, like you said, it becomes a depressed type of mode. Like, why didn't I get it? Where did I go wrong? And you start questioning yourself.
Right. You start thinking that you are a failure because you didn't reach the exact goal that you had set.
Correct.
And, it really is. I think you're so right about that. It's all about flexibility and having eventually you sort of you build enough resilience to know, okay, that didn't work, but I have these ways that I can stay creative.
Yep.
One thing that was a big surprise to me is that I could create my own work. That never even occurred to me. And so when I was on the radio for over 10 years myself, I began to write my own plays. And it was a very empowering feeling to learn that I didn't have to wait for permission. I didn't have to wait for somebody else to say, yes, we approve, we give you this job. I said, to hell with this. I'm going to write my own work, and I'm going to make my own future. Take control a little bit.
You're amazing because, like, every time I let you speak, you answer like 2 or 3 questions. Because one of my follow-up questions was going to be, like, what caused you to start writing? And what you stated was because of broadcasting and you had all that time, you started more getting into writing and creating your own work. As a broadcaster, though, when you switched from not a low, but a question part of your life, questioning certain things in theater, and why broadcasting over like directing music videos or something? And I only say music videos because that's what I used to do in Atlanta, and then I did one in New York. And I'll say a quick story about New York. It was my worst ever experience working production was New York, not because of New York, but because of what happened on film production. The margin of error is not like 1 or 2, it's 0. You don't make mistakes. And those who do make mistakes normally don't get called back to work again. Well, I made a mistake, right, and I locked the keys of the cargo van inside. That, man, I was, as a grown, I wasn't grown like 40, but I was in my 20s. I felt like bawling. I mean, I was to that point of almost bawling like a little child because I locked the keys. It was, I don't know the avenue it was, but Spike Lee office was right down the street from where we were filming, and it was a mess. I had to wait there until the rental company that we rented it from came with an extra key. So of course, they went on. They're not going to wait for me, so they went to the next location. But that's why, not to knock New York. I never looked at it as a bad experience at New York. It was my cause of what happened in production. But I'll never forget.
That's the kind of thing that can happen to anybody. And in the grand scheme of things, such a small thing, but when you're in the heat of that moment and everybody's looking at you like you're the one holding us up,
correct,
it feels like a life or death event. And it's really hard to keep perspective when the stakes feel that high. It's like, oh, this is going to be the end of my career. I'm never going to work again. No one's ever going to want to work, and you go down that path, and it's easy to do. I have a lot of experience going into the dark places.
It's
pulling myself out of them.
Yeah, and so that's why I guess you said, hey, let me go and like you said, broadcasting isn't as easy as people might think it is, because then you still have hours. You have to plan your program. Then you still have to, that time frame that you have isn't for free. You have to find a way of how is it going to be dealt with. And then whatever contract situation you got into with the company of that time frame. So I understand both are hard. Is which one a person really enjoys more?
Yeah. When I went into radio, I didn't know anything about it, and I was terrible. And it really, there is something to be said for 10,000 hours to master something. I mean, when you spend every day doing live radio for 10 years, you get better. There's several skills that I acquired during those years that I never thought that I would have, and now I'm able to use that in my work now. So basically I'm able to use everything that I've ever done is now informing my work now in the way that I produce.
Great to hear. Now, before, I have to go on a 1-5-second break, but before we go, if you can say your first and last name, the name of your book, where we can get it, and as we come back from break, we'll jump straight into the book.
My name's Walker Vreeland, and I produced the audiobook of Corona City, Voices from an Epicenter. It's all about the coronavirus in New York City and New Jersey at the height of the pandemic. You can find that on Amazon, the hard copy. You can find the audiobook on Audible, audible.com. Beautiful book full of photographs and essays, and the audiobook is a really immersive experience that I think people really enjoy.
Great. We'll be back in 1-10 seconds. Thank you so much for staying tuned to 90.9 FM. My name is Lawrence Boschulte, and my guest, if you could say your first name, your last name, the name of your book, and where we can get it.
Sure. Walker Vreeland is my name. First name Walker. People usually think that's my last name, but it's my first name is Walker, last name Vreeland, and I produced the audiobook of Corona City, Voices from an Epicenter, edited by Lorraine Ash, published by Magic Dog Press. And it was a wonderful experience working on this. I'm looking forward to telling you all about it.
Great. As what in your mind made you think let's do this one about Corona instead of something else? Or instead of like, oh, you could have flew to the Virgin Islands and done one on the Virgin Islands. But that's upcoming. Yeah. That's the one coming up. But but what was inside of you that made you want to do this one? Not much. I can hear it. I'm not sure. Hello?
Let's see. Hello?
Yeah, I'm good. You're perfect now. Go ahead.
Okay, good. Sorry about that. It's probably a lot of signals being crossed between where you are and
correct.
Where I am.
And it rained here for like the whole day, so the lines are probably waterlogged.
And I'm in Chicago, where it's 71 degrees in February.
What?
So, life makes no sense.
What?
Yeah, who knows? The world is burning, and we're all going to die. So anyway, to answer your question, I did not conceive of this book. I was brought on to produce the audiobook. Okay. And so, again, it's a book of personal essays and photographs that all really kind of cover the entire pandemic of what it was like in New York, really what it was like from many different perspectives. Survivors, first responders, business owners, are all telling their stories. And I was brought on to turn the book into an audiobook, and it was a big job because we had 63 different narrators. So we had a different voice actor per essay, which was a lot. It's a lot of voice actors to juggle. And but
so you were in charge of
everybody.
I was saying no problem. I was saying, so you're in charge of like 60 people and scheduling them and getting. Oh man, that must have been challenging.
Yes, as a radio person, I'm sure you can appreciate that. So it was a lot of a lot of time and energy went into it, but it really is unique because of that. And we had a lot of actors give their, donate their time and their talent to this, including Joe Mantegna, actor many people know from Criminal Minds and the Godfather Part 3. And then a lot of Broadway actors, friends of mine who I called on and asked if they would participate, and so many were willing to be involved and to donate their time, because this book and the audiobook are for charity. So all 100% of proceeds go to fight hunger, and which is really important. So if you buy this beautiful book, either in audio form or the hard copy, you are doing a lot of good.
Great to hear. As they were going through this and you editing and being from New York, was there anything that you heard that you say, hey, I'm not sure if that's totally accurate?
Well, actually, no. I was able to relate to all of it because I was there during the pandemic myself. And so, it was very, as I read through it, as I listened to it while producing it, everything was familiar to me, from the fact that we had to quarantine, the fact that everything was shut down, how the news was affected by it and also affected the event, all the people on the front lines. I mean, just being in New York City, and I was in New York for 9/11 as well. So I knew what it felt like to be in New York City during a crisis. And there is just something about it. I've said this before, you feel it in the air in New York. It's a sense of camaraderie and kindness, of people looking out for each other. And that's another thing. Another misconception about New York is that everybody is cold and no one makes eye contact, no one says hello to you. But when the you know what goes down, New Yorkers are the first ones to check on their neighbors, to make sure, anyone elderly in their life has enough to eat. It really made me proud to be a New Yorker. And every night, I don't know how much this was on the news, but every single night at 7 p.m., everyone would open their windows in the city and bang on their pots and pans. And it was a way to say thank you to all the first responders who were going through their shift changes. So the day shift doctors and nurses and EMTs were leaving, and the night shift people were arriving. And during that transition, literally every single night at 7 p.m., you heard that music of pots and pans, people banging and cheering, and people on their roofs yelling and cheering. It really made me proud. It really made me proud.
I'm going to go on another minute break. We'll be right back. But before I go, if you can say your first and last name, the name of the book, and where we can get it.
Sure. My name is Walker Vreeland. The book is Corona City, Voices from an Epicenter. You can find it on Amazon. You can get the audiobook on audible.com. And if you'd like to see what I'm doing, other projects, my website is walkervreelandproductions.com.
Great. We'll be back in about a minute and 10 seconds. Thank you so much for staying tuned to 90.9 FM. My name is Lawrence Boschulte. I'm my guest. If you could say your first and last name, the name of the book, and where we can get it.
My name is Walker Vreeland, and the book is called Corona City, Voices from an Epicenter. You can find the actual hard copy on Amazon, and you can get the audiobook of Corona City on audible.com.
Great. I know I told you that we were going to wrap up at 7:45, but if you have a few more minutes, then we can just jump in the last about 3 or 4 more questions.
Sure.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay, great. So earlier you mentioned about the money for the purchasing of the book goes to feeding the hungry.
Exactly. Feeding America. And 100% goes to Feeding America to fight hunger. And that's really important because whenever any city as big as New York with a population that big shuts down, people fall through the cracks. So, low-income families, the elderly, anyone who has pre-existing health conditions. So, a lot of populations were impacted by just the isolation. And so it's just important to know that when you buy a copy, you're doing good for those who are struggling. And we've already donated over 50,000 meals to date.
That's a lot. You might not have the answer, so I apologize if I ask and you don't. As an individual now, are you with this group, or you're part of the organization itself, or is there you guys' next step to probably try to talk about either mental health or the homelessness in an audiobook, something similar to what happened when we shut down for COVID-19?
Well, I'm a freelance producer, so I'd love to participate in a project like that. I try to do projects that I care about, that are personal to me. And so as a New Yorker, as somebody who was there during the pandemic, it meant a lot to me to get to help tell all of these stories.
I should have asked you this question in the first portion, but since I have about 3 more minutes left, I'll ask this now. What did you find the most difficult being from New York? And I know you stated the city almost never sleeps, kind of dozed off. What did you miss during the COVID-19 time that you felt could have still happened? But because you hear both sides, you hear people say, "Oh no, it's a good thing we shut everything down," and then you hear the other side like, "No, we could have done certain things differently to continue normalcy." What do you feel about that?
Oh, that's a tough one. I'm not sure. Because we're all kind of in the same boat when these things happen.
Yeah.
And some people trust what they're being told. Some people don't.
Correct.
At the end of the day, you have to make your own decisions. Obviously, you can't. I mean, when things are shut down, it's not like you can go anyway. All of the speaking of theater, all of the theater in New York, all of Broadway was shut down for months and months and months.
Yeah.
And so that accessibility, I missed that a lot. Being able to see friends. I had been working. I'd been working at a restaurant just a few weeks before COVID, and the restaurant shut down. A lot of people that I was seeing on a regular basis, all of a sudden I didn't see anymore, and then the restaurant closed, and a lot of those people I never saw again. So it was, it's just really bizarre and sad.
On my end, I normally don't go to the beach much, but they shut down the beaches. So people, locals here like freaked out. Like, wait, we've never shut down the beaches before, and they looked at it more like it was a healing process. The ocean is more of a healing process than a hindrance. But the understanding of the government was scared that we keep the beaches open, but then you guys have parties, you guys get together, and it defeats the purpose of us being shut down and being at home, stay at home situation. So I understand both sides. They shut down all the. I don't mind you shutting down the gym, but I think I had an issue shutting down like the tracks. When people wanted to walk and exercise like that, they weren't allowed to do that. And it's like, wait, we're supposed to try and stay healthy, but then we can't stay healthy if you're shutting down all the recreation facilities. So
right, exactly.
Pros and cons, you understand why as well. Because then if people are saying, okay, the beaches are shut down, but we'll keep the facilities open, then everybody will flock to the facilities. So then the recreation park. So then it's like, so I totally understand both sides. So sometimes you just have to look at both sides and then make a decision on it. And it's something we learn from and hopefully never have to do again. But there's ways that like I said, go ahead.
Yeah, no, you just said it. I think we learned a lot. Sadly, I don't think it will be the last pandemic in the history of the world. We hopefully will be more prepared going forward.
I totally agree. As a freelancer, and I know because this might be my last question, I don't want to touch nerves or anything. Do you have anything in mind? I know you said you want something that touches you, that makes you feel good about life, and it's hard to find projects like that, though. I know, Walker, it's difficult. And like I said, even let's say mental health is something that you might want to do. It's touching to find out a lot of what people go through to be in the situation they're in. And let's say you use homelessness. Most of the majority.
Are you there? Oh,
I'm sorry. So I'm here. So it depends on what you might get, whether it's homelessness or mental health or those things. And like I can't even do, because I have a daughter, so I can't do stuff that talks about rape or different items like that because it'll drive me nuts. But then we still need to know about it. We still need to be educated. So I admire what you're saying about something must touch you, but it's difficult to find something that touches you and not make you sad while you're doing it. Because I know when you had to do the audiobook about this, it had to affect you a little bit because you were like remembering, having flashback, like, yeah, remember when this store was here and now it's no longer, or remember what happened at this street.
Yeah. Well, you bring up a really good point. And I think a lot of creative people, a lot of artists encounter this, asking themselves, do I want to do this project? Do I want to go there? Do I want to go to that place? And sometimes you just don't want to for personal reasons because it's going to be grueling. I've always lived my life in a way that I've always tried to share my own personal experience. Having been on the radio for 10 years, I was very open with my own personal life. I had struggles with mental illness when I was younger, and I talked about it. And so I always came away, whether it was my story or now that I'm helping other people to tell their stories, I always end up feeling that there's more positive than there is negative because we're opening it up and helping other people feel less alone, less isolated with their experience. We can all relate to loss. We can all relate to fighting for our lives or being in any kind of crisis. And so there's something about...
I totally agree.
Yeah.
I agree with what you're saying, but my allocated time is up. But before I leave, I want you to say your first name, your last name, the name of the book, and where we can find it.
Absolutely. My name is Walker Vreeland. You can find the book on Amazon. It's called Corona City. The audiobook is on audible.com. That's AUDIBLE, audible.com. And if you would like more information about me, you can find that on my website, which is Walker Vreeland with a V as in Victor, WalkerVreelandProductions.com.
Well, Walker, thank you so much for providing this information, and we look forward to your next project.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure.
Same here. Bye.
All right. Bye-bye.
That brings us to the end of the show. I should be on Saturday, 12 to 2. Stay tuned to 90.9 FM.